Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Julie Schaefer, and I'm here today with A Garcia. We are going to talk about holiday stress. And A is somebody I met because she was attended my summit that I had back in September and reached out to me. I think you had a login problem, but then we got to talking, and she seems particularly suited to talk about the issues of stress over the holidays. And so I'm going to let you introduce yourself a little bit and tell us a little bit of your story and what makes you uniquely qualified and what you bring to this conversation about managing stress over the holidays.
Well, thank you very much, Julie. I appreciate that and everything that you've done. And I love your book, by the way. I recommend it to everybody.
Thank you.
So, as she had introduced, A Garcia is my name, and I am a survivor of a double attempted homicide. I was 8 months pregnant, and I'm a strong believer of post traumatic growth. It just takes a while for you to understand that when things happen to you that's out of your control, that's when you're a victim. And once you realize that it was out of your control, that's when you were victimized. And when you no longer want to deal with anything like that or ever repeat it, you have grown. So,
I
with
like
that,
that.
oh, thank you. So I've actually lived 20 years off the grid, just for my own privacy and safety reasons. And yes, those two things can be combined. But I've learned how to cope with a lot of things, especially triggers and stressors. And I am happy to discuss that with everybody that can benefit from it, especially as we move into the holiday season.
Yeah. And this is a really unique holiday season that we're headed into. Last year, a lot of us were prevented from being around our family and spent the holidays at home. And this year, we're feeling a little more free to go out and about. And yet this is going to come with that, a lot of the stressors that are typical of this time of year, like we're having to juggle the kids and the partners and possibly work and the family we grew up with, and they can poke our buttons like nobody's business, right? And so we get stressed, and then sometimes we get triggered. So can you talk a little bit about stress and triggers and kind of the difference there?
Absolutely. Stress is definitely something that I think we can all relate to. It creates stomach problems, it'll create headaches, dizziness, tension all throughout here. Sometimes short, a little bit angry,
Yes.
a rapid heartbeat, maybe some chest pain. That's typically what I believe stressors bring on. Triggers, on the other hand, although quite similar, I think that triggers can be positive and negative. Triggers actually create a distinct, like, physiological change. And I can give a few examples of both positive and negative. If you imagine walking into, the home where you're attending the gathering, and the little toddler comes running up and you get this big smile on your face and you squat down to give them a hug. That's a positive trigger. You felt the emotions going through you. Now, on the negative side of a trigger, somebody says something off color, you might put your eyebrows down, put your eyebrows up. What did you say? And some examples to that, again, with the bad and the good, you'll feel the love, the joy, the warmth. Maybe you'll feel amused. And then on the other hand, you can, feel the unexplained anger. You can feel the increased anxiety. You can feel your blood getting warm. You can feel your heartbeat racing or your breathing starting to increase. It's definitely something that you yourself can recognize on the spot when it happens.
Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot of people experience triggers as being this like sudden sort of overwhelming emotional reaction to something. And it's important to recognize, and I think this is part of your message here today, is that even though it feels overwhelming, it's sudden and overwhelming, there is room for you to recognize that that happened and take an action so that you don't just spout off at the mouth or do something that you might later regret, because I think that's the state that we often do things we regret later. is when we're triggered and angry or upset about something. Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's why I brought up both the positive and the negative, because honestly, if you can navigate through what you already know is a trigger for you, and when you feel that, it's literally just taking a moment not to react like you were saying, which most of us actually do.
Yeah. Right.
But take a moment to really acknowledge that and respond instead of react. So if you're feeling a negative trigger, just, just a quick, what I call sanity check or a self check. Okay, what's my intended outcome here? Why am I being triggered? What do I need to change right now in order to change this negative trigger? So you could replace it with one of the positive triggers. You could remove yourself from the environment, excuse yourself from the environment. Just don't allow yourself to get pulled out of character.
Oh, yeah. So that to me suggests that if you do anticipate that you're going to get triggered, and we oftentimes know that that is a possibility for us, is to, as you walk into the situation, set an intention for how you're going to be. And if you find yourself being triggered, to return to that intention.
Absolutely. And something else I was going to say, that you mentioned earlier as it relates to this time and everything being juggled, find 2 or 3 things that you do consistently, because your daily routine is gone.
Right.
So at least find 2 or 3 things that you do that you can stay consistent with even during this time, so you feel grounded. I think that's a big help in this situation.
Do you have those things? Like, what would you do?
Well, keep your workout going.
Love it.
you
Yes.
know, that's one. And then for me personally, I make sure that I stay in my prayerful space daily.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, so for others, that may be meditation, that may be, anything else. But
Yeah.
definitely at least 2 or 3 that just keep you grounded. And no matter how much you're juggling, it won't move you from those day-to-day routines that you do for yourself.
Yeah. No, I think those are so important because they do ground you and make it possible to return to that grounded state when you find yourself in stressful situations. But you got to do it. Like, you can't
Right.
just like think about it. Yeah. Yeah. I'm glad you brought up the idea of positive triggers, and I loved your example of the toddler. One of the things that I think that happens is that uh, we get caught up, like we could be so excited to go to the office party and then to a family gathering and uh, cook the meal or cook a part of the meal and take it there and be really looking forward to that and not realize how much that's pulled us out of our routine. And that's stressful in and of itself. So to give yourself a little slack, sleep a little more, do your routine, your exercise routine, prayer, meditation, that kind of thing is going to be really important for navigating that positively stressful situation. Yes.
Definitely. And accept the help that people are offering. A
Oh,
lot of times where it's, oh no, I got it, it's okay. But in honesty, you're taking away their genuine desire to help. And it'll help take a load off as well, and enjoy the company.
yeah. Yeah. I love that. I often like to encourage people to think about accepting help as giving somebody else the gift of that feeling of being helpful.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's not just giving and receiving. It's when you accept help, you're giving also. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. This is a time of year where money gets really stressful for people, and you have some things about financial stress that you want to talk a little bit about that.
Absolutely. Financial stress and or triggers. This is where they kind of play hand. So honestly, I think that the best thing for folks to do is to gain clarity on their budget. I think that we kind of all overspend, knowingly and unknowingly, and at no fault of our own. Sometimes we see things that we want for ourselves, and we, rack up on that side. But you know you better than anybody. So you know your habits, you know your budget, you know what needs to be taken care of beyond the holidays. So, however you need to balance that, it's really, if it's easier to see or see what you're spending or stay within budget by having cash instead of plastic. That's definitely a way. If you're feeling stressed in that negative side or that triggered on that negative side, remember why you're doing it. Remember who you're doing it for. And then really just keep that in balance. You don't have to worry about what people want. You know, gift giving is from you, and it's not really so much, you know, what you're looking for as a response from the person that's receiving your gift.
Yeah.
So I think managing that, the money and the stressors and the triggers to that capacity is really helpful. So having clarity and then knowing how to control the budget.
Yeah, that's a hard one, isn't it?
Oh,
Yeah.
but it goes back to reminding yourself, really, beyond the holidays, am I putting myself in a deeper hole? Am I gonna be stressing out even more? It's just maintaining that balance. Even if you have to come up with a few do it yourself things, do it.
Yeah. Yeah. And those are oftentimes so much nicer anyway, because they do come from the heart.
Exactly.
Yeah. You know, it's sort of what hearing you talk about the managing the financial stress makes me think of being aware of your situation, financially in this case, and knowing your limits and getting creative about how to function within those limits so that you can express yourself with, and you don't have to do it necessarily financially if it's going to break the budget, right? Yeah. And you talk a lot about being aware, and you've got some steps you wanted to share with everybody about that.
Oh, it's the be your incredible self formula,
We all need that.
right? Oh,
Yeah.
thank you. Uh, well, the Be Your Incredible Self formula is actually applying situational awareness with emotional intelligence to meet your intended outcome. So, as Julie was just saying, you know, while we're spending money, while we're out there, you know, how are we aware of things that are going on? So, situational awareness can go many different avenues, but for the sake of what we're talking about today, while you're out shopping, be aware of your surroundings. Be aware of how many bags you have in your hand. Be aware of how many times you may see the same face. You know, if you have 2 or 3 bags, go to the car, drop them off, go back. Stay off your phone during that time. Just pay attention really to your surroundings for your own safety. And then again, that money to make sure that you're staying in budget.
Yeah.
And then how are you not reacting again but responding? So the emotional intelligence, there is I actually have a real definition for emotional intelligence, and that is identifying, understanding, using, and managing your emotions for a positive outcome. So if you're feeling those emotions during spending, during being out, during even the activities or the festivities at the gathering in the home or wherever it is that you're at, it's really being able to dig inside. And maybe it only takes 30 seconds to a minute, but really understand what is the intended outcome here. Be aware of your surroundings. Who is around? What is around? What's being said? What's being done? Is it healthy for you? Is it safe for you? Is it positive for you? Is it going to trigger you? Is your response going to trigger somebody else? It's really about applying the best version of yourself mentally and emotionally to create and mitigate really your environment, because you're in control of that. You can excuse yourself. You can go play with the kids that make you happy.
Right. Yes. And I like that you are in control.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So take
And,
control.
and that goes back to the clarity, being clear and grounded and what you're doing, why you're doing it, and where you're sharing that energy.
Yeah. Yeah. I really like the suggestion of being situationally aware, and, you know, how many times have you seen this face? How many bags do you have in your hand? Where are you going? And is it safe for you? Because I think sometimes we can get into our own we're worried about things, you know, maybe we're worried about money, right? And we're like, okay, and I got to get this gift. I'm all in my list, and we're not paying attention. And it, you wouldn't even need to be in a situation where you're worried about, say, you have a stalker or somebody like that. You could just be anybody out shopping, right? And be vulnerable to somebody taking your bags or harming you in some way. So you're right. That's really important. You just don't want to introduce more chaos in your life than necessary.
Right. Anything to reduce being a target.
Yes. Right. Right.
And it is known that if you look at somebody in their eyes and they recognize that you did that, that's an automatic like deterrent because
Yeah.
you've
Yeah.
so don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Have the courage to look around, keep the phone down, and look at people.
Yeah.
You need to know how many times you're seeing the same face because that should be a flag for you right there.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And something I don't think most of us think about. I think most of us live in pretty safe neighborhoods and we're like, I don't even think about that. And then it'll happen. And we need to be very aware. Right. Yes. I also really liked the discussion of the emotional intelligence and identifying how you're feeling. As a therapist, what I've noticed, and I think actually one of my favorites is Brene Brown, and she talks about this too, right? Is being able to identify your emotions. And most people, and this is according to Brene's research, don't have a lot of words to describe how they feel. They have words like I feel bad or I'm mad, right? But not a lot beyond that, And we need a whole host of words to be able to describe, I'm disappointed, I'm scared, I felt hurt, this made me sad. I'm angry, I'm confused, I feel lonely. We need to be able to identify those states in ourselves. And if you're feeling lonely and you're not able to identify that, it might come out as I feel bad, and then you might get angry at somebody, but because you haven't explored that, it's coming out all wrong, because being angry is kind of doing the opposite of what you need to overcome feeling lonely.
Right.
And that was just one example. So I like that. So, and a lot of times I think when we first start out on this journey, we need to spend a little extra time trying to figure out, well, how am I feeling here? And so I like that you identified we need to be able to name our feelings and remember our outcome.
Absolutely. And to be honest, I think that something that would actually help people identify those feelings once they can put a word to it, regardless if it's confused or, well, I'm not sure at the moment, but why? And then ask yourself why 5 times.
Oh, 5 times. Yeah.
By the time you hit that 5th why with a real answer, you can likely start getting to the real root of what you're actually feeling and understanding why you're feeling that way.
Right. Yeah.
And sometimes it might take people that know what their triggers are no time at all, where other people that are just starting to kind of familiarize themselves with this physiological change and their feelings, it might take a little while, but it's for your own health, sanity, environment, whoever you're a role model for, whatever you want to be portrayed as, in the family, in the world. It's important to respond opposed to react.
You mentioned in our first conversation about creating 3 lists.
Oh, yes.
Do you remember that?
I do, but that's homework. Okay, I'll tell it now.
Did you want to talk about it later?
No, that's fine.
Okay.
So this is your homework.
Okay. Yes, we all need homework.
Absolutely. And really you have a week.
Right.
So it's creating 3 lists. And the first list is knowing the things that will trigger you. Identify them. Because once you identify them, they're easier to navigate through. And if you do this prior to the environment that you're going to be in or that you're committed to going into, you'll be able to easier identify it on the spot and respond opposed to react.
Yes. Yeah.
Now, the second list is to write a list of barriers. The barriers are things that will prevent you from being triggered. Like I had mentioned earlier, if you already see the conversation or don't want to go into that environment, change the environment, find what makes you happy, go play with the kids. And then the other list is a list of what you want to do instead. So once you identify the potential of being triggered, what is it that you want to do instead? So maybe I gave the answer of what to do instead in my previous list of barriers, but the barriers are more preventative, where the what you want to do instead is replacing, right? So
Oh, I see. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So the barriers are, I know that we're getting to a place in the family dynamic where I'm going to get triggered or it's going to stress me out. So I'm going to prepare by going in the other room at this point. And then, but if it's, but you could also in the middle of an interaction, if you recognize, then you could also leave or have something to say, pull that out of your back pocket because you prepared ahead of time.
Exactly.
So that you can diffuse the situation. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I actually have an example to share with you.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, this was a conversation I had earlier this week. And I said, oh, I want to talk about this with Julie because it was so fitting. It was a son that reached out to his mom that said, Mom, I love you, but when I see you, you trigger me, and it's from my childhood. And out of respect, I am not going to partake in the festivities this week or this year. I'm sorry. And the mother was actually quite offended and did not very well to that.
Right.
And unfortunately, that wasn't the person that I was talking to. Otherwise, I would have, kind of coached them through that. But I'm putting that out there as an example of as the recipient of the invitation, there were triggers there. They knew what they were. They identified them. They called out of respect, gave the respect to say, I'm not going to go. And that's my example of putting the barrier. Now, on the flip side, the receiver of the denial of, the invitation was also triggered. Their feelings were hurt. They took it personal. As the mom, I can kind of understand that.
Right.
But at the same time, I'm also here to say that, do not take responsibility for somebody else making a decision, or I'm sorry, do not take offense to somebody else making a decision that's healthy for them and more than likely healthy for the entire gathering or the environment that they would have potentially gone into, and maybe it wouldn't have been such a great outcome.
Right. Right.
So it's kind of on both sides.
I really like that because what he did is lay the groundwork for future conversations, and maybe that'll happen after the first of the year. Yeah, I can see why mom might be offended by that, but at the same time, it's oftentimes something that we do need to say.
Right.
Yeah.
And respect, respect where somebody is at, respect where they're coming from. And that will lead me into over these past 2 years that we've been going through this pandemic, people's mindsets have changed. People's triggers have changed. People's stances and belief systems have changed. So be aware of that as well. When you're going into these gatherings and you're a part of these environments, just because things are new, we are evolving. And you may not know what somebody's personal trigger is. So being aware of that physiological change that I was talking about within yourself, you can also identify in other people.
Yes.
So yeah, so that goes back to your situational awareness again. So it all ties in right here. And then, gosh, if you add the alcohol.
Yeah, right. Which we often do.
Yeah, just call the Uber.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. Okay, so tell me the 3 lists again.
Okay, so the 3 lists are identifying the potential triggers.
Okay.
And then the second list is identifying the barriers to those triggers.
So what are you going to do to try to avoid them from happening in the first place? Is that
just prevent it altogether?
Prevent it altogether. Okay.
Right. So if somebody comes up to you and they bring up a topic that you already know is triggering, just politely shut it down. I'm sorry, I don't. That's the barrier. So barrier, boundary, almost very similar. And then the last list is what you would do instead once you identify that potential trigger taking place.
Okay, so that's in the middle of the trigger. What are you going to do?
If you feel it.
Yeah, as soon as you feel it. Okay. I like this, and this is really focused on you at managing yourself during the family gathering. I imagine that if somebody's listening to this and they're pretty okay with everybody, but they've got a sibling that has struggled within the family, and they might be able to make this list for the sibling. So I know my brother Joey tends to get drunk or doesn't like it when dad says this, and dad's going to say this, right? And maybe there's a way for you to both take care of yourself, and depending on your role within the family, maybe there are things you can say or do to help mitigate the upset that could occur.
Absolutely.
If you had anticipated it in advance, like pull your brother out of the room.
Right.
Right.
And that's why I'm urging you to do these lists, because again, it helps you navigate when that situation is real time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So preparing, and you can't prepare for what you don't know, but you can have, an idea
Yeah.
of what might happen.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you're going into a family situation, you are probably very well schooled in all of the things that can go down in the family. Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Especially if you're avoiding them on purpose all year long, and now you're in front of them.
Right. Right. Well, is there anything we haven't talked about that was on your mind today?
Let me see. Let me see if I have any notes here that I wanted to talk about. The only thing really is, I did introduce myself as, a survivor of a double attempted homicide. So I do want to put out there, for all of those that have past trauma of any violent situation. And we all know that there's so many things that fall under DV: mental, emotional, financial, economical. I mean, the list goes on and on and on.
Yeah.
Just stay grounded. Have the courage to do what is right for you. Be reminded of who's looking up at you, who you're an example for, and really make the best decision for yourself. During this time, unfortunately, DV, increases because of the gatherings, because of old emotions, because of the triggers, because of alcohol. And there's a whole list that just keeps piling up. Mm-hmm. So just stay grounded and know what your options are. If you can leave, if you can avoid, if you can replace, just apply what is best for you and the ones that are depending on you.
Yeah. Yeah. And it might be also a good idea to know some resources for help if you need it.
Absolutely.
In your local area. Yeah.
Well, and that sometimes, I'll be very honest with you, it's very hard the first 24 hours to get real help, real time. Mm-hmm. The National Domestic Violence Hotline has been one of the resources that has not been as impacted during this pandemic that a lot of other smaller organizations have. I actually have spent an entire month calling different places just to see how it is and how it's going to affect the holidays. I did this myself on my own time. Mm-hmm. And literally they are the ones that are helpful. And because they're national, they have an abundance of resources and information across the country. And the beautiful thing about them is that you can actually text.
Oh, so do you have that number handy?
The text, let me see if I can find it. Okay, so it is a text that I'm gonna have to find it off the website. I don't have it off the top of my head.
We'll put it in the information with this video where we post it.
Yes, because they do respond from different phone numbers almost each time.
Of course.
But that's because it keeps it private and anonymous, and you do what you need to do if it's deleting it or following through or whatever. But definitely out of all the places that I have called, they are the ones that pick up, respond, and have information.
Oh, good. So you can call the national number. Okay, so we'll put that in the information with this video down below or up above, wherever this is posted.
Okay. And of course, if it's real time, 911 is the number to call.
That's right. 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 Okay. Well, it has been such a pleasure talking to you about this. I think holiday stress is something that, I don't see a lot of out there in terms of people talking about it or addressing it. Maybe it's just the channels I'm tuned into don't talk about it, but I think it's super important because it is an incredibly stressful time for people for all sorts of reasons. So,
all levels.
Yes.
This definitely hits us on all levels. And like you said, from family members, they know the buttons.
Yes, they know the buttons exactly. And oftentimes it feels like they like pushing them. I'm not sure, but it can certainly feel that way. Yeah.
So avoid that person.
Right. And or that topic. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm sure we'll have future conversations. I think you have a lot to share with the world. You've got a website. So you want to tell us what that website is?
Oh, sure. It's beyouриncredibleself.com. And you can find me on social media. Same thing, Be Your Incredible Self.
Okay.
And I do coach one-on-one. And I'm coaching about post-traumatic growth from an abusive situation. And I'm also looking to coach coaches on how to be DV resource, since there's such a scarce availability of advocates and human resources or human social services to provide aid.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm all about being your incredible self, regardless of what has happened to you in the past. That is not your identity. You are an amazing person that has amazing things to do, and being your incredible self is how you're going to do it.
Yeah. Nice. Nice. Well, until next time, thank you very much for joining us.
All right. Thank you. Enjoy the holidays.